All right, guys, we have finally made it to the final video in this series. And man, a lot of work has gone into this. Even though it's just me talking about champions in the game, it takes a while to get the voiceovers and the editing correct on all these, not to mention deciding the list and really thinking about the repercussions of who I'm putting where and what the order is and all that kind of stuff. So anyway, this is the top 10 champs in the Mystic class. And we're going to keep the theme of the last two. In Tech, we didn't include Ghost because everybody knows Ghost is number one. In Cosmic, we didn't include Hercules because we all know Hercules is number one. You all know who the number one Mystic is, right? It's Doom. So I'm not going to like make you hold your breath and wait for me to say who number one is. You know it's Doom. He can take any fight practically because of that power control and just shutting down. He's got massive stats and resistances. Very overtuned champ. He's clearly number one. So we're not going to include him in the list. This is technically a top 11, but that's the last we're going to talk about Doom, and we're going to do the next top 10 past him. This is a really stacked class. It was really difficult to pick these champions, and kind of just like Science and some of the other classes, I feel like if I made an honorable mentions list, I could easily include another 10. So I'm sad about some of the champions that didn't make it onto this list. But the top 10, I do think they cover a wide variety of utility and different ways to play as Mystics. They're not all nullify, they're not all neutralized, they're not all buff punishing. They kind of make a mosaic of different types of utility that fit into a nice, entertaining top 10 list. I hope you enjoy it. Let's start with number 10. I was very sad to leave Wiccan off this list. He barely missed it. However, my number 10 is going to be America Chavez. The buff to America Chavez makes her one of the most unique Mystics in the entire game. If you want to fight a champion like Adam Warlock, who's neutralized and nullify immune and all that stuff, you can still get around it with America Chavez. I mean, technically with Mordo too, but with her, she punishes buffs on the opponent. It's a very unique ability. And then she also has crazy power control against ability power rate with her negative zone. She has a really good regen if you line up the special 2 correctly, or the special 2 can do a ton of damage depending on which kind of form you're in. It's not that difficult to connect those heavies because she gets sort of like the Doom Slap style heavy. And yeah, man, I mean, she gains power, so she always has access to specials. Just the way they changed her buff, like yes, they capped her ceiling a little bit, but they made her so much better in generic fights. I'm so glad she's a 7-star. I've only cracked the surface on her. If you really want to see some good content on her, go to Vega's channel. He has always been a big fan of this character. He advocated for her buff, and he even gave a few ideas that I think may have even been implemented into the buff for America Chavez. She is one of the most unique Mystics, and she could not be left off this list because she is so unique. So she is going to just slip in at number 10. It's a champ I haven't used a ton, but who I know a lot of people love to use. And if you want to see her used well, check out Vega's channel, check out Nas channel. There's a lot of content with America, and she definitely deserves this spot. Number 10. Coming in at number 9 is a real pretty guy, and that would be Mojo. Now, I'm going to say this right now. Longshot also barely missed my list. And I know a lot of people put Longshot and Mojo in the same camp because they came out the same month and the same year, basically. So like they were really compared to one another. I think as time has gone on, similar to America, Mojo's utility is so important in this class. And it's the anti-life field that shortens the duration of buffs. So any kind of buff control or like mystic conditioning or anything that is on the node, he can usually get around. So like going up against Cersei with her glancing, this will work. I can't think of all the options in my head, but like Hulkling, for example, you know, shortening the duration of the buffs. He attacks it a certain way. Obviously, you need to get the prompts together, which takes a little bit of RNG, but like if you heavy attack, you can change the prompt. There's a lot of ways around it. And then having the persistent charges definitely helps him throughout an entire quest. And then if you give him a lot of Sig Stones, the Fury gets pretty massive. But again, the main reason he's on this list is not a lot of things are immune to degen. He gets some pretty nasty power gain as well. He gets that huge Fury off of the Sig ability if you get him ramped up. And that shortened duration of buffs, man, that is beyond powerful and so unique in the game that someone like him needed to make this list. And that's why he comes in at number 9. So next up is number 8, and I'm going to give this one to Juggernaut. He's one of the easiest to play champions, I think, as long as you can kind of keep track of where you are in the unstoppable cycle, because you pretty much just hit the opponent and throw a special 2 and great things happen. If you want to use a little bit more finesse with him, you can use the unstoppables to get some openings. You can kind of manage the unstoppables so that you hit 10 right around the special 2. The nullify that he gets off of the SIG is very powerful. The stagger that he gets off of his heavies is very powerful. If there's some kind of debuffs in the fight, you can throw a special 3, which gives you that pink gem, so you won't lose your gem. You know, that's a good way to kind of get around, like, you know, if you're fighting Terrax or something and he's putting the armor breaks on you, just do the special 3 first. Just like all these mystics, because of Mystic Dispersion, he often gets power very quickly in certain fights. The staggers obviously will help that even more. So like getting to back-to-back special 2s is usually not that hard. I think he does a lot just based on that speed, but because he's pretty simple, I couldn't really put him that much higher on the list. But in terms of just being really effective, like especially in Battlegrounds when it comes to speed, he's kind of a nuisance on offense. He's just such a solid rework, and I feel pretty comfortable putting him at number 8, because, you know, in some scenarios he's going to get stuff down faster and with more health than other people. But when you look at like the most dangerous fights that Mystics are taking, I'm not sure he's always the best choice. Like, he was great in Eternity of Pain against that Craven and the Icarus, so like we did prove that in some pretty difficult content he can take on those buff matchups. But like compared to some of the ones that we're about to go into, I think you'll see why he's this low. I do have mad respect for this guy though, and I think coming in at number 8 says a lot about how good his buff is. So now number 7 is somebody who on any given day could also be like number 2, and that's Clairvoyant. Tried and true, so unique in the Mystic class. She's got those immunities, which we really haven't seen since Absorbing Man came into the game, which is very, very good, very versatile. But like the 2 things that make her so insane is that special 2, man, buff immunity. 2 words, man, buff immunity. There's nothing, there's no node, there's no ability in a champ that is going to stop that unless if they shrug the debuff, and even so it's going to work for that split second potentially to get rid of the buffs anyway. So that basically bypasses a lot of the new things we're seeing in the game, like Mystic Conditioning and like Nullify Immunity, and you know, stuff like Adam Warlock, who are coming out without the ability to nullify, and Gallon and things like that. Buff immunity still works, and it's why she's always going to be a scary attacker, so good because of that special 2. And then there's just so many other ways to play her. The way the lifesteal works in the Blood Curse, it's such a powerful regen, especially if you run recoil. That's usually the way most people play her. They just spam special 2s, no buffs, keep topping off your health. It's so powerful. If you're not running recoil though, I really like that Hellfire Curse because it is direct damage. It is not associated with any kind of modified attack, which means like Safeguard, Weakness cannot reduce that red damage off of the Incinerate mode. Additionally, it cannot be enhanced, so running recoil and stuff like that is not going to help that type of damage. But the fact that it's just steady red damage, it's just a steady number that cannot be changed, can be really helpful. And the power control mode is pretty good because it doesn't really drain a ton of power, but it basically allows you to throw a special 2 that grants no power, which is something that Magic used to be able to do. So Clairvoyant has always been one of my favorite champions. I think she was sort of like the updated version of OG Witch, where there's just a little bit more control over her. I don't think she's overpowered. I know there was some discussion because she appeared in that 7-star graphic that the Kabam wanted to remove her. I do think that buff immunity, though, is a little bit of a scary ability. It's something that makes designing nodes and champions a little difficult because of what it bypasses. That said, she is not as powerful as some of the champions that I'm going to be saying after her, just in terms of like raw power level and the way that they fight the majority of fights. But her existence in the game, she is never going to be obsolete because that buff immunity off of the special 2 is so unique. The regen is so good. She's just a classic Mystic champion, could arguably be higher than number 6, but for now we're just going to put her in, or excuse me, this is number 7. We're going to put her in this number 7 slot very solidly as Clairvoyant. All right, so next up we have come to number 6. And this is going to be the Hood. Now, Hood, I love Hood, man. I have a lot of content on my channel using Hood. He's really, really good against Cosmics because he has two forms of buff control. He has Stagger and he has Fate Seal. And kind of similar to Clairvoyant, unless if they're immune to Fate Seal, that special 2 just wipes the slate clean. It gives you a ton of power from Mystic Dispersion. And then also you have the access to Miss. You have the reduced ability accuracy that comes from having that Hex on them. You can be stealing their power and you're stun immune. It's just a really, really good system. Now, a lot of people complain that you run out of bullets, which, like, yeah, if it's a really, really long quest and you don't have the Mole Man synergy and you don't have a lot of ways to gain them back from buffs, you're going to run out of them. But in most scenarios, you're only using him for a couple fights, which makes him so good for Battlegrounds, makes him so good for War. And you know what? If you play him well enough, you can get those bullets back anyway. And if you're using him in the types of matchups that you want a really good Mystic for, you can get them back anyway. So I love Hood. I've got some really good videos of him. Like, I just took a really difficult Gore with him recently in War, and I think his value has just been going up and up and up. The other crazy thing about the way his little bursts work off of the hexes detonating is that each one detonates individually, which means against future Ant-Man, all of them detonate and they are not subject to that 10% damage cap like Gallon's burst is, because it's just like a bunch of little bursts, not just one big burst. That's kind of silly, but it's how it works. So it's just another hidden piece of utility for him. I just feel really in control with Hood. The more used to him you get, the better, in my opinion. You can dash back and hold block. You can throw the special 2. You can use Mystic Dispersion to get power back. If you get thrown to the special 3, it's not the best thing in the world, but the bleed off of it is pretty powerful. So, you know, if you're close to the end of the match, that might be able to kill them or take them down anyway. He's just such a good Mystic champion. I love the rework. I'm so glad that they kept the buff control in there for him when they did the second rework. He's just a staple of any Battlegrounds deck as well. Really good rank 4, rank 5 candidate. Hood makes it a number 6. Okay, now we're getting down to the top 5, and for me, I'm going to do a champ at number 5 that I don't really ever use, but who I totally respect, and that is Diablo. And talk about a simple to use champion that is just so powerful. I mean, at his base, you're basically just heavy attacking and throwing on poisons, and then ramping up, throwing a special 3. I mean, there are a lot of things that he can do with his utility, like, you know, nullifying from a distance and energy resistance and things like that. But most of the time, he's just there because he's healing back. He is throwing a lot of poisons on the opponent, and they're dying before he does, and that's kind of what he does. Obviously, very good with the recoil tree mastery on, arguably somewhat broken with it on because you can just continually heal. But even if you're not running that, I feel like if you have Mystic Dispersion and you're going up against buffs and things like that, he's still going to be doing quite good. So yeah, just one of those great reworks that is just so simple. There's a little bit of finesse in playing him, like which pre-fights am I going to use? Am I going to use none so that he's even more powerful? Or do I specifically want to counter something in this fight? So I do like that strategy aspect of it. But for the most part, man, you're just laying down those poisons. They're ticking away and you're coming out victorious with a lot of health left. And that's Diablo in a nutshell. Okay, we've got top 4 now. And just remember, Doom is off this list, right? So it's technically top 5, but we're not going to talk about Doom. So number 4 on my list is going to be my own personal rank 5, Spider-Man Supreme. Now, the reason I put him a little bit above Hood and a little bit above Diablo is because he does not require any buffs on the opponent to be good. And in fact, in some scenarios, if you're really skilled at playing him, he's better when there's no buffs. If you're really good at landing those medium intercepts, which you, by the way, do have a safety net on, you have like basically a free miss mechanic anytime you try to do that, you can easily ramp up your spider charges so that by the time you get to a special 2, you've entered the spider totem mode, the orange mode, and then, you know, at max Mystic Dispersion, it really increases the damage as you get rid of those spider seal buffs. And you can use stuff like the Sig ability to have them run into you with a medium so that you gain a burst of power and get back to another special 2. Very easy to get off 2 massive special 2s during one orange cycle. Sometimes you can even get to 3. But then if they do have buffs, they ramp up even faster, and you're able to make a copy of their buff at your own potency and put it on yourself. The ones I really love are the regen. You just get like free regeneration back, or the furies, but it's more buffs than that as well. But I found like when you have those furies going and you throw a special 2 in the spider totem form, it's just phenomenal. If you get pushed to the special 3, it's not the end of the world. You get them rooted. You can just do medium while they just stand there trying to throw heavies at you. That will help ramp you, or it will help do damage by nullification. Again, you do want Mystic Dispersion on him because it increases the red damage, but it doesn't have any effect on those Spider Seal buffs. So unlike Dr. Voodoo, who often would get rid of his Loas and shoot red, that's not going to often happen when you're using Spider-Man Supreme. And I do like his miss mechanic. It's a little bit of a safety net. I've often talked about it like it's similar to Kitty Pryde. Like you're doing a lot of dashing in and out, things like that Kitty Pryde would do, but it doesn't feel as cheap. Like I feel like Kitty Pryde is a little bit too cheap with how easy it is to access. With this one, if you mess up, you're going to get hit and you don't have a lot of health. So there is a little bit of skill to playing him. But I've found like for your mystic needs, this guy is great, but he does more than just the mystic needs. Like I love using him in battlegrounds against a non-cosmic champion and just having fun seeing if I can get them down. I took down like a Sasquatch in one match recently, just because that special 2 just like burst through the entire phase and there was no regen or any problems at all. You just got to be comfortable with him, but I do rate him as my number 4 Mystic champion. All right, guys, top 3. Number 3, giving it to Rintrah. I think Rintrah is the easiest to use neutralize champ. I think he is tanky as all heck. Very difficult to die with him. Between the energy resistance, between when you root them, you basically take no damage and you heal off of the root debuff. He has regen off of the special 3. That's all well and good. I have found, and listen, I can practice Rintrah and get better at him. I've found he's a little tricky to manage and he's a little clunky in terms of knowing when to throw the right special, knowing when to root them, knowing, am I going too heavy to keep these ruptures going? That said, he has the easiest access to neutralize against cosmics in the game, and he just laughs at champions that do that. The power gain off of the Sig ability can be helpful, help you get to a special 2 after throwing a special 1. If the special 2 crits, they're dead. Often in battlegrounds, I find I need to throw 2 special 2s. Sometimes 1 will kill them. He's very, very good, but he's just, the best way I can describe it is a little sloppy, the way you play him. It's not a refined play style. It's just, I'm just going to kind of corner them and hit them. And like, yes, they're not gaining any buffs. I'm just going to kind of YOLO and throw the special and then, oh, big special 2, they're dead. That's great. And that's good. I always feel a little out of control when playing him. And it's great he has the safety nets, because the safety nets basically mean even if you make mistakes, you're probably not going to die. But I just don't like, it's kind of like driving like a stick shift car. If you've never driven stick shift or something like that, you're just kind of not, you have a really powerful machine, but like you don't really feel like you're fully in control of it. And that's how I feel with Rintrah most of the time as I'm playing him. I don't necessarily enjoy playing him, but I do respect how powerful he is. And that's going to segue right into number 2, which is Tigra. And you might say, well, wait a minute, Rintrah's, more tanky and all this stuff. I will tell you this. If you need neutralize, if you pick Rintrah, you're less likely to die. So you would say, well, why is he not number 2? And that's something I said in one of my other videos. It's because Tigra does Tiger things, man. She is faster, she is more elegant, she has a pretty darn powerful neutralize. It will come up on every hit if you can just manage to actually land the hit. If you study the animations of your opponents, there's a reason that if people see a high ranked Tigra in a Battlegrounds deck, she's an automatic ban, unless if you're also like a Tigra main yourself. So like, I am considering the skill component, I am considering the homework that needs to be done when using her, the fact that if you do make mistakes she can die. You might say I'm being a hypocrite because I ranked Kitty Pryde as like the number 3 mutant, and why is Tigra higher than Rintrah when they're so similar? I think Tiger's better than Rintra. I'm sorry. Like, even someone like me who is not a proficient Tigra player, but a comfortable Tigra player, I would prefer Tigra, unless if it's a war fight when it's literally like the objective is just like don't die. But when it comes to like speed and elegance in the fight and being able to take on more difficult fights, I do think Tigra has more range. And really, it really comes down to the speed and like her doing what you want her to do and not relating on the AI and the power gain getting out of control with Rintra. So these two are interchangeable. They're the best two neutralized champs. If the only goal is tankiness and like who cares what the fight looks like and how it feels, I just want to not die, I think Rintra's number 2. But if you're looking at the holistic nature of the character, you're looking at speed, you're looking at like the way the champion flows and looks, and if you practice her, how good she's going to be, Tigra's number 2, man, and I will stay with that one. So anyway, that brings us to number 1, because Dr. Doom is not going to be talked about. And my number 1 mystic right now is none other than Absorbing Man. And he is not everyone's favorite champ, and he does take a little bit of skill to play. But when you look at the matchups that he has where he owns it, like if there's armor break, if there's some kind of immunity coming into play, he's so easy to play. He is so easy to play. You just spam the special that you're working on. You do a medium, light, medium at some point. If you can manage to land a heavy before a special, you do that, and then they just die. And in the process, you have some absolutely massive resistances. You have some access to healing. And that's basically this champion. He is so good in the matchups that he was designed to take to make it so that you don't even have to think about what you're doing. The pausing of the forms just happens. Like, you don't even have to do anything. But then if you do learn him and you figure out ways to land light attacks and to extend his forms a little bit more, then he becomes such a good counter to other fights. There are sort of like middle of the road fights, like say Korg or Thing, where he's going to have some ability to like reduce the unstoppable on Thing and sort of do red damage so that you don't trigger protection. Or against Korg, you can start in magma form so that you don't take any thorns damage. And also there's a lot of energy resistance in the negative when it comes to Korg, so you're going to do more damage against him. Things like that, where yes, you do need to land a few light punishes. Like, you do need to interrupt basic attacks with your light attack. That's how it's written. But like, if you're comfortable doing that occasionally, he's still going to be a great matchup. There are a few times where you're stretching him a little bit too thin, right? There's a few times where it may not make sense to use him. But I think overall, when you look at what his entire kit does, he is the best Mystic champion besides Doom right now. And the other thing I will say is one of my favorite things about his design is the special 3, because often with Mystics you get pushed to the special 3. We talked about that earlier with Hood, how that's not ideal. It's not the end of the world, but it's not ideal to get to a special 3. With Carl, in some cases it actually makes more sense to do a special 3, because what that does, it'll refine the form that you're already in, which does that for free, and you get a crit damage bonus, which means your red damage is going to go up and up and up, especially if you're landing the heavies. So you know what? More power to you. If I'm trying to spam special 1s, Uru, and I get into the yellow range, I'm not going to throw that special 2, I'm going to throw that special 3, and it's basically going to do what I need to do, especially if there's some kind of buffs and I'm gaining extra power. Carl is just a force to be reckoned with, and it's not just about war and battlegrounds, but that is where he shines the most. We have a ton of rank 5 Carls in SSX right now. I'm sure some of it's because the designer is in our alliance in DLL, but like, people respect and see how good this guy is. You throw him up against Null, against Terrax, against Hulkling, against Annihilus, one of those matchups, he is pretty much the best on almost any node. He can take any combination of Hazard Shift. With the I-Bomb synergy, he also becomes poison immune. He has some other really interesting synergies. And again, you throw him in Uru form, that physical resistance, it really adds a lot of block proficiency and tankiness to his kit on top of everything else. If there's some kind of energy, if you're fighting Dr. Doom, throw it in magma form, you get the same amount as energy damage reduction. And similar to Scorpion, you can pick your poison. Am I going to do instant incinerates, or am I going to do bursts of physical damage? Depending on who you're facing, you can choose either one. I love that sort of pick your poison mentality when it comes to Absorbing Man. So he's going to be our number one. Doom, we already talked about. You know that he's the real number one, but we kept it to a list of 11, so we didn't have to talk about Doom too much, even though I kind of did. So anyway, guys, that is going to end the series. We have done it. We have done the top 6 classes, which is, I said that wrong. We've done the top 10 champions in the 6 classes, and we finally ended with Mystic. We got them all out. I hope that you enjoyed this series. They will be in a playlist together. If you did like this, if you give me enough likes, if you give me enough feedback, I will continue to do this maybe every 6 months. They do take a little bit of work, but they are pretty fun to make. So anyway, let me know what you think. How did we do here? And I'd love to hear your opinion as well, specifically about the Mystics. We'll take it from there, and I'll catch you in the next one.